Good morning, Summit Fellowship. Thanks for joining us as we continue on in our Holy Week study. I want to read to you this morning a passage from Luke chapter 22, verses 1 through 6. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called Passover, and the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people. Then Satan entered Judas, surnamed Iscariot, who was numbered among the 12. So he went his way and conferred with the chief priests and captains, how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he promised and sought an opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of the multitude. As Passover was quickly approaching, and as the streets there in Jerusalem were continually filling with more and more people, the chief priests and the scribes were caught here in the middle of a rock and a hard place. And they were desperately wanting so badly to try and stop Jesus' spread of influence as people continually came to him time and time again. But at the same time, they didn't want to do or say very much because they feared the people there in the city, that they might cause an uprising and come after them. And the interesting thing to me about this passage is as they were constantly fearing this great multitude of Jesus' followers, really, we find here in this passage that it was one of Jesus' own disciples, one of the 12, that created a path for Jesus to be handed over to the Pharisees and the scribes. In fact, verse 3 here paints a very frightening picture for us. It says, "Then Satan entered Judas." Now, I believe as we read this passage, we can be reminded of a couple of important truths. First, I think that we see here that both God and Satan are looking for people to use. Both God and Satan are looking for people to use. And we can either be instruments of Satan, or we can be mighty weapons in the hands of God. Secondly, I think we find in this passage that it was Judas that opened the door to Satan. It was his own doing. In fact, there was one author that said, "There is no handle on the outside of the door of the human heart. It must be opened from within." And so in his own free will, Judas opened the door for Satan to enter into his own heart. And thirdly and finally, I believe that this passage reminds us that we need other believers to hold us accountable. Verse 6, "So he promised and sought an opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of the multitude." Not only were the scribes and the Pharisees scared of this great, ever-growing group of people that were following Jesus, but so was Judas. He was as well, because he knew in his heart that he was doing wrong. And so he knew that it wouldn't be easy to do these things if he was constantly surrounded by other believers, by other people who loved Jesus. And so today, here in Holy Week, as we're preparing our hearts for Easter, I believe that it's important for us to decide in our own hearts that we want to be used by God. We need to decide that we will only open our hearts to Him, and we will also surround ourselves with other believers to keep us accountable. Blessings to you. We'll see you on Easter Sunday.